This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
I'd like a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which were nicely sent twice by Leslie.
So moved. Second.
I just have one.
Second, can I have a discussion?
I was present that meeting and I'm not listed there as present.
I think the corrected ones I
Oh,
did.
did you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought these were the corrected,
Okay.
sorry.
It
Okay.
wasn't second.
Just to be clear, the corrected minutes are the ones we are approving.
Right.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we have to do a roll call. Crystal,
Here.
say yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Pat?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Chuck here. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And I'll say aye. Public speak. There's no real public here. Caitlin's here. Report the mayor. Maybe we should knock on her door.
I can do that.
Thomas Godin. Hi, Caitlin. Welcome.
Hello,
Good to see you.
good to see you too.
We're just collecting the last
This was the one that was
meeting guest.
Yeah.
Not yet.
I looked at the corrected, last week. I looked at the corrected meeting, is it on there?
Right, I'll fix it. So
That's a question.
not surprised at anything at this point.
I hear you. Everybody does.
I'm probably going the other door.
Let's see if I have a pen.
Yeah.
I
I
need
think-
Tom for the rest of the day. I
He's
need Tom for the rest of the day to remind me of my schedule.
available.
He's available. There you go.
Interesting, like desk schedule reminders.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
It could go either way.
Lindsay's not around.
Good. I know, poor Lindsay. All right, Dan is gonna keep us on track and out of here at 1 PM. All right.
Well, that depends on how much Nicole wants to speak.
Why-
Just to say something, Nicole, you must be really important because for the first time, I think we have all 10 members.
Yeah, I don't know, important. I think I am the one who's putting the budget together. But let's be,
Anyway, we
Okay,
do have Caitlin from
Yeah.
Mass here.
Mhm.
And primarily, this is for you to ask us questions. I have the report up on my computer.
Mhm.
So whatever questions you want to ask, if you reference the page number, I should be able to bring it up.
Okay, great.
Also, anything that UMass has written should be directed to Kate.
Sounds good.
Or yours.
First, I didn't know what the work product would be from this group, and it's amazing. Actually, the planner, our newer planner, Allison Manuel, and I have been like flipping through it and put actually some pauses on our capital improvement plan just to think about how to, go forward and to kind of lock this in. Hold on a minute. Locations. More clarification than, more clarification or seeking, how the location. So when I read it, with the locations, the further explanation, page 10, when you're saying further explanation, we're talking about zoning, about like what we can do with lot lines and whatnot. Yes?
Wetlands, things like that.
Mhm. And with that, the locations, I'm just gonna go by how would this committee put forward to the formal committee any recommendations about where purchasing of land or site prep happened if even design of the building wasn't ready? Like, to secure, do you think that we could, you know, in planning this, is there any advantage, or could there be an advantage to get the land first? Or put some options on it before, I'm just looking at some of the locations are a little more complicated than others, but all of them, you know, you clearly put out, they all have a vision of how it could work.
Okay, so from attending a building feasibility and design workshop at the Mass Council on Aging, I looked at my notes from that.
Yeah.
And their top suggestion was, before you hire your consultant to do the first part of your feasibility, have 1 to 2 sites that you've decided on. It will make your life much easier and be much more economically controllable than coming with 5 or 7 sites. But that was a suggestion from the architect and another director.
And I think we also believe that the next committee would be the ones that would narrow it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But if you notice, we stated that we listed the sites in order of
Yeah.
most probable to work.
Mhm.
And those first 3 that are listed are all municipally owned.
Right.
And I believe, maybe with the exception of one of them, there was plenty of land, like 16 acres on one.
Highland, yeah.
Yeah, so that if there were issues with zone, lot lines or wetlands or whatever, there should be enough acreage to work around that. We did look at privately owned sites that might have risen higher on the scale than Highland did. However, in casual conversations with the owner, they had 0 interest in selling the land. 0.
Yeah,
Not even if they put even if I asked you, put a stupid number on it, and they
Yeah.
wouldn't even do that. They wouldn't even do that, so.
I just have a question about process, and maybe Tom, you can answer this. Wouldn't we need to hire, the building committee would need to hire the architect first in order, maybe they narrow the sites to 2 sites. Wouldn't that architect have to advise us, this site has these issues that you might need to think about, the cost of them? I mean, I don't know what you meant by consultant, but to me, we need to develop a design, and that includes what are the land costs, not only if we purchase, but also prep. And I thought, don't you need the architect? I mean, you did the schools, and I'm just curious how that.
Right, but that would be for the next committee.
The next committee, but I'm saying, when we talk about a consultant, you're
Yeah.
talking about an architect? What were you meaning by that?
Right, so
That was one of my other questions further down.
right, so if you look at what other towns have done, and we've looked at some examples of these, and where they show in the final plan that they produced for the building committee, they evaluate the different sites, they have all the criteria laid out, and we met with EDM a few meetings ago, and they said, the cost of your design will be impacted by, is the lot an L, is it a square, where is the driveway going to be? So there are some basic things that impact this.
Agreed. It just seems to me,
Her simple question was, do you acquire one first if it needed to be acquired, not a city-owned? I think the answer is no.
If it's city-owned, no.
Well, if city-owned, you don't have to acquire, but her question was, should you pinpoint and acquire
Yeah.
before you start designing? Then I would say, no, you would wait
Okay.
to get some
Yeah,
part
I
of the
mean, that's
design
the-
done
when
first.
I s-
That's my opinion.
Yeah, and when I saw the Highland Ave and just some other stuff that's going on around it, that's been, planned, not planned for, at least a decade, just concerned about, or wondering about, yes, it's city owned, but surrounded by some undeveloped land, what would be the implication?
I think the traffic light helped us look at that location in a positive light. So there shouldn't have to be any infrastructure improvements a la roundabout for the Tasty Top property. There's already an existing light that allows an exit from this property. I think, Mayor, that some of us likened this back to the 2 school projects. So in those projects, because it was determined it was going to be built on the existing site, the architect really had no choice. He had, door number 1 was make this work. door number 2 is it's not gonna work, start over and go find another site.
Yeah.
So they were given the charge of make this site work for the high school and for Mountain View. So I would hope the building committee, if they decide that that Highland is the right place, or Park Street or Hoyok Street is the right place, committee would say, make this work until it doesn't. So do whatever you have to do to make this site work until it doesn't work.
And I would think, given the 3 sites that are city-owned, most likely one of those sites will be the site, that the architect could be hired, and then we may need to buy, we don't have to buy them. So the architect could consult with us and say, really, we have to bump Highland down, Park Street's better, or because they know more about what's needed. We're gonna probably talk about traffic all the time in the building committee. I mean, that's what happens. So I think the process to me is, number 1, get a building committee, number 2, get an architect. I don't know how that works, but.
And they also think that Hoyok Street probably isn't gonna make the cut because we've already had a little bit of pushback from public safety.
Yeah,
Hell of a
they're
place to
very-
try to get in and
yeah.
out of. Park Street, unfortunately, is the smallest of the sites. It was, what was the acreage? I forget.
4.38.
Yeah, pretty close, pretty tight. It could be a tight site for this. So Highland kind of rose to the top. And we threw Daly Field in there just to give you some excitement. If you're like,
Yeah, right. I mean, Park and Rec is totally calm right now. Thank you so much. Yeah, just throw that right at. you know.
in all fairness,
And so I really was the one that pushed or advocated for that. And I was looking at it more of a kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I was looking at it more of a improve what Park and Rec has as far as their facilities.
Yep.
And that's why I had to push that in there. And I know there's other challenges with that, but that's the way I looked at it, is this could be, this could help 2, entities in the city.
and a la the football field, you build them a beautiful new, as part of the project, you might build them a beautiful new baseball diamond somewhere out on other parts
Right
of the
next to
land.
the dog park and the skate park.
There you
Tom.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Touch the nerve.
Wow.
I didn't
Yeah.
say that.
No, understand the idea.
Flag
Like,
on it. We're
yeah.
all set.
Yeah.
We float it in the pond.
Yeah.
You could just float.
All right. Let's let the mayor ask her question.
Yeah, so I mean, that was one, the Daly Field, like site, and you and I had a little conversation is, now to undo the work, I'm glad to see it on the list, because there is some interesting stacking of projects in use, and one of them is Park and Rec. We're going through that study now to see how big that building should be and where it could go, and multi-generational. And I'm not saying it is the answer, but I'm glad it made the list, because maybe there's,
Right.
way down the road.
Right.
There's something, and there's an earmark in our bonding schedule to bond in 29 for some kind of a building in Park and Rec. So I know, I'm not saying it solves.
No.
And one of the questions I have for Caitlin about the locations, people have said they love where it is now, understanding the building isn't, far from ideal, but the location to like downtown versus some of these, like Daly Field and Highland Avenue are really interesting to me, but they're in a much different setting. And what does that mean from your point of view and the work that you've done, Caitlin, around wants, but also how it would work?
Right. Well, the thing that automatically comes to mind when I think about the current location and just what we know about people's participation at senior centers is that parking is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that isn't really feasible at the current location to the extent that it would need to be. And so I think that when I think of location, that piece of it, the amount of parking that would be needed so that people would actually be able to access the building is sort of a crucial aspect of the site selection. And I think probably outweighs the positive of being, downtown and walkable and close to other amenities.
Yes. In one of the meetings that listening sessions that Caitlin held at the senior center. There were between 30 and 35 people there, I believe. And I asked the question, how many people walked to get to that meeting? And I believe 2 or 3 hands went up. Everybody drove. It's similar to the schools when everybody talked about neighborhood schools. 75% of the kids were bused to the neighborhood schools. So I think it's a little bit of a red herring to say we want it downtown when we hear that from people.
Yeah.
We want it walkable. Well, walkable to whom? And Northampton Street is going to be more and more walkable as development happens.
Yeah, I mean, MassWorks has over $20 million of road, pedestrian, bike improvements over the next 10 years on, everything from the bridge down out to Northampton's boundary. So, true. Okay. And then storage. And maybe this is Caitlin and the whole group. And so the idea of 1 versus 2 floors, or not straight out. I guess the question would be on building and new stretch code about taking up more of that land with a building rather than going up, and how. Again, I'm not making a decision. It's just as far as cost of building. How does that work? And the stretch code really changed this idea of the new stretch code, like elevators are too expensive, so stay all on 1 floor versus we're seeing some change in that. So.
Well, I was pretty much an advocate for 1 floor, having seen the other sites that we went to. My main concern was that, well, first of all, we asked EDM. You're not going to save any money by going up because you have to do the other work.
Yep.
But the biggest question is, and having been involved with budgeting in this city, staffing. If you have a 2nd floor, you have to provide staffing to supervise it. And
Interesting.
you have to have more than 1 elevator in a sense, because if that elevator goes down, now you have to shut the building down. Because we have to provide access. That's just ADA. So having 1 floor and having it move, I'm not familiar with the stretch code and how that would impact 1 floor building. But
And it might.
I found the
Yeah.
flow of, say, South Hadley's Senior Center, the flow wonderful. And I didn't see a 2nd floor improving on that. But what really impacted me was staffing and cost. There's no saving going up, but you have to add the elevator, and staffing was one of the things EDM brought up, right? And we talked about. Who else wants to talk to that?
Cindy.
So one architect, maybe it was EDM, had said there's a way to deal with that, which is you can make the 2nd floor visible to the 1st floor with very fancy design work to have like an old fashioned department store where you've got that central staircase and you can kind of see. And so it's not impossible to have 2 stories and have it be age and dimensional friendly and not necessarily post people. We'd have to do the research. Yep.
Anybody else on 2 floors?
I just want to mention, and I think I remember the architect saying that is true, and that also means a bigger footprint because you're taking up a lot more space in the center of the building to be open as opposed to housing. So then you're creating more space. So I think it went back to that. It's not going to save money, but it could deal with footprint issues.
That's a good point, because it's not going to save land space if you have to expand the building to have the space you want, the rooms we want. We really felt that the rooms that we've talked about are very important.
I see Caitlin nodding. Did you have something to add, Caitlin, just to put you on the spot?
No, I mean, I'm just following the conversation, and I think all the points have been really valid. And the only thing I would add to it that we've seen is that in places where, so obviously places where they're constrained by land, they go up. But that in other places, if they don't go up initially, the 2nd floor is often like an add-on. So like in a couple of the towns where they eventually want to increase the square footage of the space to accommodate more use, then adding a 2nd floor is easier than, adding a wing to an existing building with foundations and things like that. Meaning that if you don't do the, that going up is sometimes left open as an option for the future expansion, potential expansion, but that's not maybe relevant here.
Yes.
It's probably, I'm guessing it's too early to tell anecdotally how much the new stretch code is adding to the cost of new construction.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, it's not really. If you actually look at the code of what's new, if you look at like Ferry Street, so that's a great example between what's happening at 7 Ferry Street and what's happening at 11 Ferry Street. So for 11 Ferry Street, the increase in cost, it's materials. It's like the green luxury tax, which will be offset mostly because they're not for profit and it's affordable. And they're approaching it as every time you build a building, they're applying new, I don't know, for lack of new building ideas or whatnot because of the code, and they're throwing out everything else. Like they're doing pre-manufactured hunks of that building. Now you look at building 7, the contractor D.A. Sullivan has a formula that's worked on old buildings. They're not looking to gut the whole inside and whatnot. And so the cost because of stretch code on building 7, I think is going to be substantial, and it's not at all affordable. It's not for a public, so you're looking, depends how you approach it, and I think that our school project for like kind of split the middle. So it depends on how it's built, whatnot, but I think by the time there's a shovel in the ground, that cost will be smaller and smaller.
Mayor, can you, for the ignorance of some of us, including myself, and I should know this, explain what stretch code is? If it's simple.
Yeah.
General description of it.
Yeah, I mean, the stretch code, it basically is, I mean, we've just adopted it. We've adopted the highest, it's building code, fire code that is the tip top safety, but more importantly is the most efficient, especially around energy and
Energy
materials
efficiency,
used. Yeah. There's, some, what was one thing foam insulation. So foam insulation under the highest stretch code that we've just adopted, there are certain things that can or cannot be in it because of off-gassing. Everything has to be wired for solar, even if you're not doing solar like at first build. So it can be added. With the budget of this, in tax credits, once you get and you don't get, like we definitely have to wire for solar regardless. And we have to wire, not just like, and put up 10 panels, but it has to be a certain percent of the total expected energy, use of it, that sort of thing. So it's I don't want to say the most expensive parts of this code have to do with clean energy. There's some other stuff and materials that's
what I
important.
thought, but I just wanted people to hear that. Thank you. Next question.
All right. So use of space, and talking about the community accessing it or not, or how they would. Did you see, or when you looked at others, was there a strong component, like you walk into South Hadley, could you definitely see in that design that it was designed a certain way for other community uses? Or was the primary design around Council on Aging?
Having visited it myself, the primary design was for the Council on Aging, but they did want to have city meetings there.
Okay.
They did make a mistake according to the previous director, which is that they can't lock down the certain work parts of it that are like in the reception area. So you have to traverse through the spaces where work is done to get to that meeting room. And they would rather maybe have had it so that you could walk in from the exterior into that meeting room. And you wouldn't have to worry with then people just be wandering around the whole center. And then the other piece, I'm not sure how they handle it there, is staffing wise. Does it mean a staff person has to be there, or can you have a cheaper staff building monitor
That was
there?
my next question.
Yeah.
Is, could we have like Like, I guess if it's locked down or whatnot, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a director or manager or whatnot. We could go, okay.
Well, like, I just want to touch base on that. I think if we know we want to have it open for community, we have to ask the architect to plan for that. On the other hand, I think it's important to understand if people are in that building, it has to be, and I don't know how you do it here. There's meetings in here at night. But all the doors are locked. So they can
No.
get, no, not to the outside. I'm talking about
Oh.
your office is locked.
Yes, yes, yes.
So that would be the case, but does that remove open space? Because now we have to lock all the doors so they're smaller. Whatever works, but I would think if I were the mayor, I'd say, yeah, you can use it, but you have to.
Are you running?
Oh, Jesus. I hope
Come
not.
on, Pat. That's
That was the sound of the
That's a
door
softball.
closing. Anyway, I would make sure that there was staffing, maybe custodial staffing or something. On the other hand, we want it open to one of the biggest aspects of this for me was a veterans place, a place for veterans to meet, to have an office is one of the rooms we selected.
Yeah.
So they should be able to get in there, but that director would probably have a key and just like you would. So I don't know. I just think you have to consider.
Yeah, and I'm not looking for decisions. I'm just trying to understand that.
Crystal.
Oh, Dawn.
Dawn.
I'm
Crystal,
I'm
Dawn.
Crystal today.
You look alike.
No, not really, but okay.
So I was thinking a little bit because we did a bunch of visits, and I think it's really important with the community using the building to be really thoughtful about what spaces they're using and for what purposes, because there's a really big range. I think access is important. Like Westfield has their veteran services in a wing. And so access, you can access that part of the building without accessing the whole building. South Hadley has this meeting room that they would much prefer people could access only for that, but not the rest of the building.
Yeah.
Both for staffing, safety, like the ability to understand what's happening. Then was it East Longmeadow or Longmeadow that has like the community center where they have a gym and the gym is used after hours for the whole town? One of the things that he brought up is he is like, you so underestimate the amount of staff it takes. It's like a whole other thing. It's like running two totally separate organizations in the same place with a huge amount of coordination and cleaning and logistics. And he's like, that is a way bigger thing than most people think it is and don't necessarily staff appropriately. So I think just the building committee being super clear, the town being super clear, what other purposes would we want? And then how do we set this up to best use those and make use of staff? And then also, being super clear on not building a space that's for all the things and not therefore good for the main thing, I think are my thoughts.
So if I recall correctly, the only facility that the site visit group visited that's specifically designed for other group use, and it was town group use, was Hadley.
Yeah.
And they have a lock off the entrance. So people can get into their community space, I'd call it, multi-purpose space, but cannot get into the facility when it's
And
not.
I think that's simply a matter of designing it with a door. This room will be for outside group meetings. The other thing about it though is if staffing becomes an issue in planning this, we should recommend staffing to improve the programming, which the new space may allow. In other words, more senior center staffing rather than having more custodial staffing or being able to have to pay for night meetings. I don't know how that works, but I would rather see staffing develop for that.
I mean, part of this is all the rage when it's first built. I look at the safety complex as a community room upstairs. Maybe there's a lot that goes on there, but it doesn't seem like there is from where I'm sitting.
Oh, there is.
That room.
Like, it's hard to get that room.
And it's
For outside groups.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
no.
guess I don't get invited to a lot of meetings.
Yeah, no.
Even
talk
we
too
use
much,
it. We use it.
Let the senior center come.
So, so I think I would then, I would reiterate Dan's point. It should have its own access. That group can get in and out without getting into the rest of the senior center.
Well, they have to go by the dispatch center, so there is some protection there. Get to that room. So.
Yeah, or barrier, depending on who you're talking to. Yeah, so Caitlin, when we're talking about all these different possible uses but the main purpose is a council of aging, like in your experience in different places, how much of that actually comes to fruition? And then I guess the second question is, how often does the access that we're talking about undermine the primary purpose? Like when we go out to build something, it's going to be council on aging.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that in my experience that often in terms of what comes to fruition is that there is sort of the natural schedule of things, meaning that the senior center operations are typically during, 9 to 5 business hours, and the community uses just by design are often evenings and weekends. And so it does, from that standpoint, like not, you're not sharing the space simultaneously per se. And so that happens sort of by design. I will say that the caveat to that is places that are actually like co-locating departments. And so like if, the rec, there are cases where the rec department has an office at the new senior center, and then they're talking about, having to deal with coordinating and scheduling issues and things like that. But that doesn't sound like what we're talking about. And I think realistically from people talk about the community center model and the multi-generational community center model. There are very few examples of that in practice that we've seen. It's more of this senior center with the paths for community to use the space sort of on the off hours. And sometimes they worked out arrangements where, there's a rental agreement, or there's, sort of like there are ways to figure out how to manage some of those relationships with respect to how to pay for custodial services and things like that.
Great. And that kind of rearrangement. So we have in the past, the city have been approached by different not-for-profits, especially around Pepin School. So YMCA, Boys and Girl Club, we're really looking to do a partnership with the city and those spaces. They did not have the funds, nor did they want to expend the funds to do their own thing, but look to add on to or co-build. So I had talked to them when we actually put the RFP out for Pepin, and it just wasn't something they weren't willing to sign that lease and do those improvements, so it didn't work. But have you seen those type of projects with the Hoyok Boys and Girls Club, but more YMCA? I'm trying to think of, it's Wilbraham. I went to one building, it was Council on Aging, and they had a mini YMCA there that was like guaranteed access to recreation, exercise, weights or whatnot for the hours of the COA. And then I guess it locked down, and they even had like a 4-lane pool, like much smaller than normal. I didn't know if you've seen anything. I guess first, what questions to you about that, and then just throwing it out to this group.
Yeah, I have not seen like the partnership with like an organization like the YMCA. The model that you're describing, where, for example, the fitness amenities are available to the wider community as a gym, like a gym space. Like I've seen it where, you register, you get a key card, and you can enter the gym facility off hours if you are a registered sort of member for the broader community. So I've seen that arrangement in place. And that does the staffing thing becomes the issue there in terms of having somebody there. But in any case, I have seen that it has not been a formal or like partnership with an external organization.
All right. And then one, just because I'm so this committee and going forward, that sort of idea, and again, I have not reached out to any organization again, hey, you said if you ever build something, you might want to talk. I'm just kind of throwing it out as an idea and interest or consideration.
I don't want to sound selfish here, but part of my question to that question would be, what's in it for us? So could it be a rental arrangement, number one, that would potentially supplement the COA budget?
Mhm.
Or could it be a funding source based on the fact that right now there's no funding, statewide funding for senior centers, but there might be for something else that's going to use the building, a la veterans or something else.
Yeah.
Is there a way to access another funding source?
There might be. I mean, when I talked to them so long ago, their first things were one, for the equipment, they would take on the liability. And for like staffing and use of that equipment and security, and that they would pay, they were willing to enter into a longer term lease. And I forget how long I think it could be 5 years, and then options for 2 more 5 years. So they would like, yes, we want to know that we're going to be there. So as far as like sharing and other funding, I think financially in getting the building going, what the big add for us would be, we could probably get them to build it almost like a condo long-term lease, and we could extend right away more of that recreation and classes faster and more professionally than having to piece it together. And as far as funding, maybe they would get a grant, but it doesn't augment what we do other than say, hey, we're not going to bond for $10 million. We're going to bond for $7 million because YMCA wants a footprint. The other thing with YMCA and the Hoyok Boys and Girls Club, they wanted really access, not 24/7, but they wanted 7 days a week and it to be separate from any other public use, which, I don't think is a pro or a con. I think it's about how it works. And I would expect from Caitlin, from what you said previously, parking is a big deal. So if that were all on the table, I think it first starts with what does it do to parking and to traffic? I mean, it's, yeah, look.
Well, I was just gonna, yes, I mean, I think that's right. And I guess going back, the parking thing gets worked out and to some extent, I said, by that natural scheduling, situation where but the other thing I would say is, we haven't seen like the YMCA or another sort of organization partner, but we have seen places where the rec departments, I'm thinking of like the town of Sudbury, for example, they have a pool and that's where the rec offices were, and the senior center was nearby. They ended up demolishing the senior center and putting up basically a community center, of which sort of half of it was the senior center, the other half was rec offices, and then they share the pool and the fitness center kind of type of thing. So there's more, but that's sort of that's intra-municipal departments. It's not external organizations, but there are some models of that sort of the fitness stuff being shared, but the program space being separate.
I mean, one of my concerns with that model and Sudbury, even like a YMCA, is you start layering on different purposes and access, and the idea that it brings down costs, and then you end up with a very muddled, building vision and whatnot. Like on the other side, I mean, nothing's off the table, but that would be, my other concern. I know, talking to some folks in Greenfield, there are definitely a group of people who feel that has happened and that it's not clear enough, and scheduling, you get somebody, who's scheduling, who doesn't understand the purpose and mission of the building, and the primary, stuff around council on aging kind of gets bumped.
Sure.
And that's definitely a concern.
My thinking on that is that I'll be selfish, and I think we should first target a council on aging building and look at how we fund that, and override whatever way we fund it.
Yeah.
If it fails, the second plan might be, okay, what if we shared it? Highland Avenue has enough space to build YMCA adjacent.
Yep.
The good side is, we get more fitness for our seniors. The downside is everything you just said, scheduling and how do we manage that? I just feel strongly that we should approach this as a senior center, a building that's dedicated to the senior center, and see if we can fund that construction.
Yep.
Crystal,
Yes, I actually partnered with the Hampshire County YMCA to offer fitness classes at Christopher Heights Assisted Living in Northampton, and the YMCA provided us with instructors at no cost. However, we had to open those classes up to any YMCA member that wanted to attend. So initially it was, a good idea, but based on our residents not being the priority population and the YMCA participants being the priority population, it didn't work out as a partnership, but that's kind of something that we've done in the past.
Cindy.
The model we have is the YMCA gives us an incredible discounted rate on offering classes, and they offer most of the fitness classes. And then we have a very experienced Tai Chi instructor separately from that. And what really works about it is it's affordable for the city. It's high quality instruction. They're all vetted and trained and so on. And the Y is willing to do it. Sometimes the Y doesn't have enough instructors to meet all of our needs. But what we often talk about is this an enrichment for the enrichment center, or is this a fitness club? And the perspective we take is we don't need to provide every kind of fitness at the senior center. We need to provide a well-rounded program, right? And especially focus on things that people can't do by themselves at home. So it would depend on, again, what is the mission and vision of the building? Is it that, in addition to creative ways to fund it and get it built, it's both.
I saw Sandy.
No, I totally agree with you, Dan, what you just said. I'm not quite sure why because I don't know enough about city and how things work, why we're adding all these other groups in our building. Is it to cut down cost? Is that what we're thinking of bringing?
Yeah, costs are also just really, like, this group is just to explore all possibilities. And, around cost, savings of cost, but also funding sources. So, like, there's a big bunch of money around community, multi-generational, centers and programming. So if some of that is appropriate or would work in this project, does that help us put a shovel in the ground and start building a center sooner rather than later? And just to kind of consider that. I know, and Crystal is probably, there has been a lot of backlash about where state and federal funding goes to in multi-purpose community buildings, like whether it's a community center and happens to have a wing that's a senior center and whatnot. So I'm just throwing out all of the possibilities and different things that I saw. Maybe it just doesn't work for us. Maybe it's like it's a COA, and like the partnerships that we have now with the YMCA coming in, and also what the city can afford per square feet. Like, why add 5,000 square feet for YMCA, when we can build something that's 10,000 square feet that's focused on us and it's exactly what our community wants. I have two more questions. One, the kitchen, and we've been through it a little bit with that. So the kitchen, as far as the different levels of licensing, as far as commercial and it says 150 people, it just seems like there's a whole bunch of different ideas. Is there one preference of how big or what level of licensing the kitchen is? And I'm saying that because commercial kitchens are so more expensive, and there's a community use kitchen. There's a whole bunch of different levels.
Where did we see that kitchen?
So
Saw a good kitchen at Southampton, didn't we?
Yeah.
Full kitchen.
So
Forget.
you could clarify, Leslie. So, we saw kitchens in every facility we visited. There are two that kind of stand out to me because they were in use. But other than Wilbraham, I'm going to leave them aside. So the first is South Hadley, which was a commercial grade kitchen, I believe.
But one of the problems there was when they designed the kitchen, they did not include a commercial grade refrigerator for whatever reason.
It
So-
was meant to be a catering, excuse me, a
catering
catering
kitchen.
kitchen, not a cooking kitchen.
So right now they're trying to put in a refrigerator, commercial grade, because their needs have changed. The other is Ludlow, which was a fully functioning commercial grade kitchen. And they serve meals there every day. Whereas in South Hadley, it is catering, or it is food prepared to be served in their cafe, which is in the entrance of the building.
Nice.
It was very nice.
The one thing we
Yeah.
saw that I liked about having a kitchen and having some meals is the social aspect that we could provide for seniors that are living at home alone. Come socialize over a quick meal or a lunch. I mean, if there's funding out there, and I believe there is, to pay for the food, or if we look into what we could afford, and the seniors don't pay as much, the big social aspect of having a meal was impressive to me, and they were doing that at South Hadley, and I think they were Hadley and other places we visited, and that was huge to me. It helps seniors, so we want to have it, whether we staff it or use it. If we don't have it, we could never use it. We're not going to build it later, so.
That's, so there's so many models, and there's the Mass Councils on Aging is working really hard on looking at what are all the different models of dining programs, what are the problems people are having with it, and having people mentor each other. Also, times have changed. So in the past, you might have a program where the town buys the food, the city buys the food, people pay their $2, and it kind of works out, and the director figures out some crazy efficient way to get it all done. And times are changing, food's more expensive, but what I think the consensus among the group was, if you build it, then you can develop a model for it. So you might as well have it. Plus there might be the possibility of renting out the kitchen, who knows, you know, and also building a dining space that matches the maximum number of people you would have in the building is good, not just for dining, but it's good as a multi-purpose space for all kinds of other needs that people have and wants that people have asked for. So that's where this committee came down on that. And then, but you know, maybe Caitlin, you can speak to the trends in dining. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the prior point, the commercial kitchen, you know, having a staffed kitchen with, you know, chefs and things, that is the meal thing is huge. Like it's the ability to provide those meals on a regular basis, the ability to have the community participate, you know, in meals and things like that is certainly the trend in terms of what we're seeing in councils on aging and their investments in new buildings, is at that sort of being able to have that level of food experience, and also to be able to prepare, you know, meals on site and things like that. So that's what I would say about the trend.
No, that's really helpful. I mean, you know, my last question is, and maybe I heard a little bit of it already, and Caitlin, you know, maybe you have a wider geographic perspective. So in these projects that you visited, what were like the regrets, or we should or should not have done? We didn't, I mean, so like the refrigerator comes up, but you know, what are the big, you know, I hear it's like build it while you can, and then maybe you work up to a level of programming and be a little flexible about what that looks like based on trends. I don't know.
One of the great things about this report is Leslie's wonderful site visit
I saw, yes.
notes. And some of those notes are, we should have thought of this.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to be so informative for the building committee. You know, they talked about, I think it was Hadley, we forgot about AV, or we didn't do enough AV, or we didn't do enough IT, and or whatever. But all of those little things, like shades on the windows, having enough glass, but having shades so you can read a book without the sun in your eyes. All of those little things will inform the architect. And I have to thank Leslie for that, because those sites, and one person told me, and I'm going to put this out there, it was a South Hadley selectman.
Mhm.
Be careful on who your project manager is, because they tend to direct you toward the less costly or the less necessary. And we need to be careful that we put in the kinds of things that other cities didn't do. And maybe it was the project manager that got them out of them.
Mhm.
Because now it costs a fortune to put them back. That's what I think Hadley was.
I think I remember storage being a big one, right?
Yeah.
Storage and just, I think, cutting down on the spaces and, thinking that you can use one space for a lot of different things, but you're never really set up for anything. Like that's right now, our main floor is everything. We do all the things and the stuff's moving in and out of it all the time. And the idea of there's always going to have to be some growth and adaptation and change. We don't want to like build something that's so rigid that we can't adjust to changing trends. But the idea of having spaces that are appropriate for what you plan to do in them, and you can store the things you need in the room is huge, I think. And that was consistently what I heard from your report is like, oh, we have nowhere to store anything, or we're moving tables from one end of the building up an elevator across the thing twice a day. Like that kind of stuff really impacts what you're able to offer and how much staffing you need.
And then being attentive to climate change. And I know, Mayor, you asked Caitlin to comment, and I'll be brief. Their Long Meadow built so much exterior structure for hanging out outside in the blasting sun, and they're like, it's too hot outside. It's too hot for older adults to sit on this patio. We wish that we had made the dining room bigger instead. So really attending to what is the climate going to be over the next 20, 30 years life of this building. And then also,
More earthquake.
one of the other regrets that I wonder about really is these cavernous spaces for the very population that has 70% some kind of hearing issue. You build these cavernous spaces so people can see each other and feel comfortable entering the space instead of it being low ceilinged. But like even Ludlow building this beautiful new building immediately had to redo the auditory stuff up on the ceiling and spend a lot of money doing that because it really didn't work to dampen the sound in their cafe.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Leslie.
And I would say one other thing is being sure the appropriate players in the city are at the table when their area of expertise is needed. So for example, with Ludlow, they said their AV system is expensive and a disappointment. And it was, I think, in part because their city staff either weren't at the table or it wasn't something that they could maintain. So
And that's the wonderful thing about having all these other beautiful buildings that were built that have all these concerns. We're going to learn from them. And that's one of the biggest things about this report, we hope informs the building committee. Do you have anything?
Did
Okay,
Caitlin want to speak to regrets?
No, I mean, I would just reiterate the couple, the things, the IT, the ability to do hybrid programming, have people join program spaces by Zoom, and all of that is something that sometimes ends up as an add-on or something that people have to do retroactively. And so that's certainly something to think about. The outdoor space, as Cynthia mentioned, I've been in a number of places where beautiful patios go unused because of the weather and just because of other reasons. And then the other thing that I have noticed, and I don't know what the current trends are, but there was a period of time, I think, where a lot of senior centers were including like almost like a medical exam room in their spaces, thinking that that's where they would do like podiatry or nurse visits and things like that. And most of the time I end up seeing those getting transformed into offices, or so somebody's in an office where there's like a medical exam bed or something. And so I just think about like, again, and I think to Leslie's point, having the people in the community who can speak to, sort of knowing what the real medical needs are and how that connects to this new space is going to be really important, so that you don't end up with things like that. And then the other one I would say is the billiards rooms take up a lot of square footage because there's the table and then the periphery. And so there's been times when that space feels like it's not getting used enough, and it's a lot of real estate to dedicate to that set of programs. And so that has sometimes become not necessarily a regret, but something that they have to sort of shift around after the fact, how those spaces are used.
Although we saw not Long Meadow, there's nothing wrong with indoor pickleball courts.
You know what? I could not believe that took so long for it to come up. Yeah,
Long Meadow, but
Long Meadow, yeah,
I know.
go pay their taxes.
But,
Okay.
but you
Just
know,
saying.
we saw what, because we had done some site visits before this committee was even formed. One of the things we saw though was 40 and 50-year-olds playing pickleball, all the courts full. That's your feeder system for your senior center activities.
Well, we got 2 new pickleball courts coming. Now we're gonna have 4.
These are
To
indoor.
respect people's time, I just want to do it. It's 12:55. Mayor, do you have more questions or comments for the committee?
No, those are my big ones. I can't tell you how appreciative I am. I mean, I knew just the crew that you are, that it would be great and comprehensive, but this is, you know, Michael Owens and I took a look at it and he's like, well, this is basically the RFP. Like what was the, and I was like, I don't know. And,
To me,
But so the RFP can go out tomorrow.
yeah, exactly.
well, could I ask you a question? Are you gonna move fairly quickly on
Yeah, I mean,
getting a building committee together?
Oh yeah, I mean, I want to get, a building committee, you know, together, or post that like we do other committees. I'd love to have folks selected by March 1st. The budget, some changes in our budget forecasting expectations might put that off, but definitely want to get it out sooner rather than later. Because I want to fund it. Like I want to put some, you know, money aside for the next steps. I'll be honest, it's not as much money as I hope maybe it would be, but you know, we're working it. I will say with confidence, it won't be under 100,000. But it won't be more than 250. And you know, what the restrictions are on that money put aside, is not trickier, but it's a little trickier because you want it to be focused on this project, but not so narrow. If, you know, for Highland Ave, like, you know, we want DPW to do, some, I don't know what they're called, kit samples or I don't know, whatever. Like we could do a level 1 environmental impact report on, you know, 2 top sites. And if it's too narrow, this is just about the design of, you know, we, you know, and Hadel, I mean, we, yeah, and just figuring out what can be done. I mean, and also if the city-owned sites do or don't work out, you know, the next committee is going to know that, and we want to make sure that there's a little, you know, wiggle in that money that we're like, okay, now we need to go talk to private landowners and there might be legal and there might be more testing and, you know, whatever, that we're not slowing down the process where you're relying on future money that may or may not be there, prioritized, you know, whatever. So, and having that in, I mean, ideally it would be great to know who's on the committee by April, and then the funding, no matter where I get the funding, whether it's out of free cash or I ask for the funding, former Councilor Rist, with deference and respect to City Council, whether the ask is in the budget with funds or it's an appropriation separately that happened before the end of the fiscal year, but not available until July 1st. I'm not sure. But
Can I piggyback on that?
Mhm.
Given that we're gonna have to, for instance, get appropriation or budget from the council?
Mhm.
Can this report be made public or given at least to them? Well, that'd make it public. But
Yeah.
in a sense, because there's so much work, I want them to know how strongly we all feel that this is the next thing we need to build in this. I mean, do you have any reasons to hold back on keeping
No,
this
I mean, I
out?
was going to post the report with the request for people to apply. I mean, because, you know, I'm not,
Sign me up.
you have to apply.
Okay.
It wasn't like, you know, so, yeah, I mean, this would be, you know,
Excellent.
I'd probably bring it to, you know, mayor communications and say, hey, this work is done, this is what it is, but also this is the notice of, and, you know, the size of the committee. I mean, I think that the school building committees and whatnot give us a good size and level of expertise. I think it's a little different, you know, as far as having school committee or whatnot. But I do like this suggest, I think, Leslie, you were saying, you know, having city departments a part of the process are really important. What I go back and forth with is, do they really need to be a member of the committee, or can they be, you know, I don't think the committee can be too big. And like to say, have the fire chief at every single meeting, when it could be somebody who has like a greater or different community-based investment. You know, I'd rather see maybe somebody, I don't know, but somebody who's you know, somebody who is is a caretaker of elders, you know, and in the community, rather than the fire chief sit there. But also making sure that committee is going to invite those folks, and not just once, you know, that's the back and forth.
Mayor, is there typically a job description written for a committee member? And the reason why I ask is that one of the cautions given at a conference I was at with this was sometimes it's not clearly defined. The committee members who are not the Council on Aging director and then the Council on Aging director, they kind of have their roles. And there's a way that the Council on Aging director has to advocate for the department and the needs of older adults. And it might be a slightly different perspective than another committee member. And then there's the, you know, who's advocating for what. So I'm just curious because, you know, some other communities have said, here's what we wish the building committee knew, or here's what makes a good building committee member. Well, what does, you know?
I mean, the MSBA process of like, when we put that committee together, it was very like, it has to have like a fire chief and a member of the school committee. And, you know, so part of me is like, you know, to have the fire chief or deputy chief at every meeting, like when I was sitting in those meetings, is that necessary? You know, no, but also I guess we could put in the scope of what the committee is going to be, that the, you know, fire chief, that department heads would get an update, you know, or get the notes from those meetings at least like once a quarter or once a month, you know, to kind of jump in.
I think those positions, fire chief, IT, those become important when you get into the design phase to make sure that we're including the right things. But from my experience on the two school building committees, the most important, the three people you have to have there is the director, the mayor, and Mike Owens. Those three people have to have those three people on the committee. After that, there's other areas of expertise you could add. So someone like Dawn, who brings to the table that expertise, programming, maybe somebody in construction, potentially, people like that. That's what we ended up on the school building committee. I think the other criteria members have to be aware of up front and ready for, it's a long-term commitment. This isn't going to be a 6-month stint. Could be a 6-year stint.
and even though there are different, no, I totally agree. And it's like, not like, oh, my part is over, or I put mine, like, you're signing up for, like, I don't know, how long?
7 years. School
Yeah.
building committee.
God, I hope it doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah, that's good.
I want to be alive to, you know, enjoy this.
And
Oh,
we'll wheel
Dan.
you in.
Jesus
We'll
Christ.
wheel you in and feed you to a straw.
You never know.
Here's the Dan risk, not at finance anymore.
You need blunt talk sometimes. And you're not the only one that gives it, so.
Yeah, no.
I want to say thank you to the mayor for recognizing that in this situation, we needed an ad hoc building committee to grapple with the issues, do the research. It was a really creative idea, and compared to a lot of other communities, we have so many resources. We have the work that we did, we have the attention you're paying to it. We have this incredible IT department that's community development oriented and already doing a digital equity project that's, you know, a model for how we could do collaboration and partnership around planning. Like, we have resources in this town that, from what I've seen, a lot of other towns don't, and it's the people. So thank you.
And no, thank you guys. And the, you know, always, you know, I have multiple agendas. I mean, the other thing that I'm trying to push with support of the staff, and especially our new planner, is that our master plan is like, it's done. I mean, like it's like a checkbox, it's like a grocery list and it is done. So for hope, my agenda is to get this going to a formal committee, but also start a formal 2-year master planning process. And we've just applied for a couple of grants to get that done, not necessarily for it to start this year, but have it funded and maybe start in whole in July. So I just see a lot of, like, when you talk about resources and being able to show to granting agencies, like, this is not just a side project of, 10 people in the city and this particular mayor, but this flows from our last master plan. It's going to be a big focus for the next one. And we have a formal committee that is funded on the COA side to get it done. So,
Well, it's 1:06.
yeah, I was, yeah.
So I want to thank everybody who worked on this committee because we have made the building committee's work a lot easier.
Yes.
We have got this whole thing started, and I hope all of you will feel, as I do, that our advocacy is what's going to get this built. And built it to a very good level, not, let's cut all the square footage we can so that it's a lot cheaper to build. As Tom said when we started, let's go for the goal and then see what happens. But I think
I
it's
like
just
when
wonderful.
Tom was like, we're not going to build a Cadillac school. We're going to build a Ford school.
Who said that?
You.
Must have been a moment of weakness.
Yeah, I like that. I like
Well,
that.
how would you characterize our schools?
I'm
I
sa-
don't
I'm
think
saying-
they're Fords.
I'm saying throw it
It's
all,
not Newton North, thank God.
I'm saying throw it all against the wall and see what sticks. And if you're off $1 million, what's $1 million over 20 years
Well, I
among
mean,
friends and surrounding you?
exactly. I mean, and that was a fight over the schools, but this should be a once in a generation building.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I know Caitlin's not on the call anymore, but there's certainly a lot of research out there and forecasting around age and whatnot, where that's not a hard thing to do. When you talk about resources, like the work that we've done with UMass and Forward and some stuff. So, yeah, I mean, that would be the idea, like the budget.
One of the stats that came out in Caitlin's presentation was in 2030, 40% of the population of Easthampton will be over 55.
Yeah, I mean,
40%.
and the aging, like the Apex, whatever it is on top of I think it's the pinnacle of just the aging cycle in Easthampton is 2034. And folks, I think we, except for Dan, who's got 7 years left, I think it's important to realize it's not like you get to like 23 or whatnot, and then all of a sudden everybody gets young.
Right.
And that's, you are talking about a generational, project, and it'll be for the next generation to figure out what happens or not, but we want to build a good, Don's point, your point about multi-purposing and using it for a bazillion different things is the best way to build a not great council on aging. I personally would vote for a pool over pickleball, but just, you see, that's fierce.
Based on our
As long as you're
experience,
ready to lifeguard, we'll do it.
based on our experience with a pool at
So I would
White-
like to ask for a motion to adjourn
And disband.
and disband. That's true. Motion to adjourn and disband the committee.
So moved.
Thank you.
And you said who's second?
Second.
You got it, Leslie? All in favor, Crystal?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Leslie? Aye. No.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.